한없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Coming up on Arirang News. The government has laid out a new strategy to expand its presence in Central Asia, addressing the region's strategic importance amid global crisis. The announcement comes ahead of President Yoon's state visit there next week. The head of the US-based company behind South Korea's oil exploration project, ACT-Geo, says the presence of oil and gas reserves in the East Sea is highly promising. He says although there's risk, drilling is the only way to test that. Medical professors at one of South Korea's major hospitals have announced that they will suspend most services starting June 17. This comes amid the ongoing dispute between doctors and the South Korean government over medical school's quota hike for new students. Good evening, it's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with the president's upcoming state visits to 3 Central Asian countries next week, with the aim of expanding the nation's diplomatic horizon. The top office released a strategy toward the region dubbed the K-Silk Road. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon explains.
South Korea has laid out a new strategy dubbed the K-Silk Road to expand its presence in Central Asia, a region with abundant critical minerals and a young population. The announcement came on Friday, just 3 days before President Yoon Sang-hyeok leaves for his state visits to Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan.
The K-Silk Road initiative envisions to jointly endow Korea and Central Asia with freedom, peace, and prosperity.
The initiative is summarized by the acronym ROAD. The R stands for cooperation and resources, such as energy sources and critical minerals. O stands for official development assistance with cooperation with the public sector. A stands for company to boost exchanges for the future generations and expanding networks for the descendants of Korean diaspora in Russia who were forced out to Central Asian countries. And D stands for drive, ways to institutionalize cooperation between governments and businesses from both sides. The announcement comes amid the Yoon administration's efforts to expand the country's presence in the global arena. President Yoon just hosted the Korea-Africa Summit and last year hosted the Korea-Pacific Island Summit. In fact, it's looking to host a summit with the Central Asian countries next year as well.
Central Asia, once the heart of the ancient Silk Road, is a strategic hub connecting Europe and Asia. Its strategic importance has increased amid the spread of global complex crises, such as the war in Ukraine and conflicts in the Middle East.
A brief itinerary of Yoon's state visits to the region was also announced as he embarks on his first overseas trip of this year. Leaving on June 10th, the first stop is Turkmenistan. As he lands, the official state visit starts right away with an official welcoming and state dinner. He leaves for Kazakhstan the day after for a 3-day state visit. There, he will have a business forum and meet with ethnic and overseas Koreans as well as having a summit with his Kazakh counterpart. He will be in Uzbekistan starting the 13th. On top of regular state visit engagements, he's set to meet with entrepreneurs who are part of programs supported by the South Korean government.
Since establishing diplomatic relations in 1992, our country has steadily expanded economic cooperation with Central Asia. However, the scale and quality of this exchange still falls short of its potential. President Yoon's visit to Central Asia is expected to serve as the catalyst for significantly expanding and restructuring the economic cooperation between Korea and Central Asia.
According to an official, more than 86 companies and organizations will be part of Yoon's business delegation on this trip. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The head of a US-based company in charge of South Korea's oil exploration project, ACT-Geo, today held a press conference to answer some questions that he faces. He says the basin of the country's east coast held high potential for oil and gas, adding the existence of key elements has been identified. Our trade correspondent Moon Hae-yeon reports.
During a press briefing on Friday, Vitor Abreu, the founder of and current advisor at ACT-Geo, explained that the firm was contracted by the state-run Korea National Oil Corporation last year, after discovering that a sink had 2 of the 4 elements needed for the presence of fossil fuels, one being sand to create a porous environment for oil to accumulate in a reservoir, and the second being mud to trap the oil, called a seal. The basin had 3 wells that had previously been drilled by KNOC in 2012, 2015 and 2021, 2 in cooperation with an independent Australian petroleum exploration company. Abreu said that in identifying why these 3 wells failed to procure results, ACT-Geo was able to identify the presence of all 4 elements in the basin.
Because we have the wells, we actually prove the existence of the 4 main elements of the petroleum systems in this basin.
He further explained that there were 7 prospects that could lead up to 14 billion barrels of natural gas and oil, and the estimated likelihood of successfully drilling in these locations was 20%. This means that for every 5 of these locations drilled, 1 of them is likely to yield results. According to Abreu, this possibility is higher than the average for similar frontier basins.
And the only way to test that now is for drilling. The prospects are ready to drill. They show all the elements. There's still risk, but it's unsolvable risk at this point. So the only way to unrisk it is by drilling.
And that's just for now, claiming that they could potentially find more drilling sites that could yield economic quantities of hydrocarbons. Responding to questions about his firm's headquarters being registered at a residential home and the small number of workers causing concerns over the reliability of results, he said that while the firm was registered to a residential home, its teams were spread around the world, which is why there has been no need for one specific office. He claimed that ACT-Geo has teams in New Zealand, Brazil, Mexico, Switzerland, Houston, and that a new branch has recently opened in London. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The medical faculty at Seoul National University have decided to suspend most healthcare services starting June 17th. A major doctors group is holding a vote until midnight, asking its members whether to go on strike. Our An Sung-jin has the latest on the prolonged medical dispute.
Concerns are being raised about widespread walkouts at hospitals after medical professors at Seoul National University announced their decision to suspend outpatient services and surgeries from later this month. The Korea Medical Association, which represents private practitioners, has been conducting an online vote since Tuesday among its 130,000 members on whether to suspend medical services. The vote runs until Friday midnight, and as of 1:30 p.m. on Friday, more than 60,000 members have voted, more than half of the total eligible voters. Based on the voting results, the KMA is set to hold a meeting on Sunday and announce whether they will halt medical services and when such a halt in services will start. This comes after the Emergency Committee of Professors at Seoul Medical University and Seoul National University Hospital announced on Thursday that all departments, excluding essential departments such as emergency and intensive care units, will suspend outpatient services and surgeries starting June 17th. The decision was made following a vote conducted with professors at 4 hospitals affiliated with Seoul National University. The Emergency Committee said that the suspensions will continue until the government completely withdraws administrative actions against residents and carries out measures to bring the current situation back to normal. The Health Ministry expressed deep regrets over the professors' decision, saying that amid the increasing number of patients, the indefinite suspension of medical services prompts serious concerns. The South Korean government on Tuesday announced that it will halt administrative procedures against trainee doctors, such as license suspension for trainee doctors who return to work. The professors at Seoul National University are demanding a complete withdrawal of administrative actions and not just a suspension. The government also announced on the same day that it will allow hospitals to accept residents' resignation letters, giving them the option to look for work at other hospitals. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, an advisory body to a committee of UNESCO has withheld the nomination of a controversial former Japanese gold mine for World Heritage designation, demanding additional documents. South Korea says the listing decision depends on how Japan responds to Seoul's demand for Tokyo to fully reflect on stark history. Sado mine, located on the island of Sado off Japan, has long been a thorn in bilateral relations between Seoul and Tokyo. For years, Japan has been pushing to inscribe the mine, which was one of the world's largest producers of gold in the 17th century, on the World Heritage List. But its bid has sparked immense protests from South Korea over the lack of historical context. This is because the Sado mine is a place where thousands of Koreans were forced into harsh labor during Japan's colonial rule of the peninsula from 1910 to 1945, according to historical documents. On Thursday, Japan announced that the International Council on Monuments and Sites, an advisory body to the UNESCO World Heritage Committee, recommended that the mine be withheld from World Heritage designation, demanding additional documents. This comes after Japan applied for the inscription of the controversial mine for the second time in January last year, after its previous submission in February 2022 was turned down, again due to incomplete documents. In response, Seoul's foreign ministry officials said Friday that South Korea's decision on whether or not to oppose the listing of the mine as World Heritage depends on Japan's actions. The official added that the South Korean government is considering not blocking a consensus from being formed if it determines that Seoul's position is fully reflected on the matter. An inscription requires over 2/3 of votes from 21 member states of the World Heritage Committee, but it's customary for the final decision to be delivered upon consensus. Seoul's foreign ministry says its objective is to reach an agreement between both governments and avoid a situation where this will end up in a vote. An expert says that it's important for South Korea to keep pressing Japan to include a full account of the mine's history.
It's important to include the entire history of the place in order for it to be listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But I think the biggest problem is that Japan only included a specific period that suits its taste when describing the history of the Sado mine. So the Korean government must continue to make diplomatic efforts, and most importantly, work needs to be done for the world to know about this.
Japan is seeking to have the inscription approved next month, when the final decision will be announced at a meeting in New Delhi. It's time to say goodbye to South Korea's F-4 Phantom fighter jets. After 55 years of safeguarding the country's airspace, the Phantoms have now retired and become history. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung gives the highlights of the retirement ceremony.
An era has come to an end as South Korea's F-4 Phantom fighter jets completed their final flights over the Korean peninsula. A fleet of Phantoms took off from their home base in Suwon on Friday, marking an end to 55 years of dedicated service. Also called the Goblin of the Sky, the first Phantoms joined the Republic of Korea Air Force in 1969. And since their first introduction, the South Korean Air Force has operated a total of around 200 Phantoms. In his congratulatory remarks, Defense Minister Shin Won-sik said these jets were a game changer, which boosted the nation's defense capabilities against threats posed by North Korea.
South Korea, the fourth country in the world to introduce the Phantoms, was able to immediately overwhelm North Korea's air power. Since then, North Korea's Air Force has been no match. The past 55 years with the Phantom have been a history of victory for South Korea.
Lee Jae-woo, a retired major general who was among the pilots who flew the first fighter jets over the Pacific Ocean to Daegu Air Base in 1969, was at the site to say farewell.
My last words for the Phantom. Goblin of the Sky. Goodbye, Phantom. Farewell, Phantom.
The farewell ceremony ended with the defense minister awarding the Phantoms an honorable discharge to commemorate their retirement. The event also featured congratulatory flights by the Phantom successors, including the F-16, the KF-16, the FA-50, as well as the Black Eagles aerobatics team. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The European Central Bank has cut its interest rate for the first time in 5 years to 3.75%. The bank's president says there is a bumpy road ahead. Our Yoon explains more.
On Thursday, the Frankfurt-based European Central Bank cut its key interest rate by a quarter point, taking the figure now to 3.75%. This marks the bank's first such interest rate cut in 5 years. ECB President Christine Lagarde said that inflation had eased enough for the central bank to start lowering rates, but didn't refer to any indication of future rate cuts, and added that there is a bumpy road ahead.
We have to be persistent, we have to be determined, we have to be data dependent, but we cannot give up on the objective. And our objective is to tame inflation and to bring prices back, to bring inflation back to 2% in the medium term.
The ECB's target for inflation remains to reduce inflation to as close to 2% as possible, though data shows that inflation is expected to come to 2.2% by 2025. While the 2.6% inflation recorded in May is well down from its peak of 10.6% in October of 2022, the decline has slowed in recent months, and there have even been hints of an uptick. Meanwhile, inflation in the services sector remains high at 4.1%. The latest rate cut also marks a divergence from the U.S. Federal Reserve, which has yet to start cutting interest rates. Yoon, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, an Israeli airstrike on a UN school in Gaza has reportedly killed 40 people, including children. Analysts believe American bombs were used by Israel. Our Yoon covers these allegations.
Weapons experts analyzing footage of the Israeli airstrike on a Gaza school, where around 40 people lost their lives in the early hours of Thursday morning, suggest that Israel likely used US-made bombs. According to a Washington Post report on the same day, 5 experts who examined footage taken following the attack verified that the nose cone of a GBU-39, small-diameter bomb, was manufactured by Boeing. Local officials in Gaza said that Israel had hit the Al-Sardi school, operated by the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees in the Nusayr refugee camp. The school was reportedly sheltering displaced people, with local officials saying that at least 37 people were killed, including women and children.
We're displaced in Al-Qastal Towers. My son called us at 2:30 in the morning to say that Ahmed, her other son, had been martyred. They hit them with a missile in the classroom in the school.
Israeli forces are saying that the attack was precisely conducted to target at least 30 Hamas militants inside the school.
We conducted the strike once our intelligence and surveillance indicated that there were no women or children inside the Hamas compound, inside those classrooms.
While the Israeli government says it will release more information about the strike, including the names of the victims, the U.S. said it expects Israel to be fully transparent in sharing the information publicly. Meanwhile, according to a Wall Street Journal report, Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, told Arab mediators on Thursday that Hamas is not going to surrender without a permanent ceasefire. This is Hamas's first response to an apparent Israeli 3-phase ceasefire proposal outlined by U.S. President Joe Biden at the end of last month. On Thursday, the leaders of 17 countries, including the United States, issued a joint statement backing the proposal, which includes the release of the hostages. Yoon, Arirang News.
Over in esports, the League of Legends is one of the biggest titles created, and one of its most successful players is Lee Sang-hyeok, better known as Faker. That being said, Faker's skills and strategy have earned him first place at a Hall of Fame for the game. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
The unkillable Demon King, the greatest of all time. There are so many titles given to T1 star player Lee Sang-hyeok, also known as Faker. And now he gains one more, the first ever inductee into the League of Legends' own Hall of Fame, introduced by the game's developer Riot Games this year. In recognition of Faker's stunning career and contributions, a promotional hall was set up in Chunggu district.
This whole building has been turned into a shrine for Korea's very own esports legend Faker, who is the very first inductee into the Hall of Legends. As you can see, so many fans have flocked to the site. 10 LCK titles, 2 mid-season invitational titles, and 4 World Championship trophies. The biggest trophy haul in League of Legends history. There were times when he struggled, though, especially after his consecutive MSI wins in 2016 and 2017. He went a long time without a trophy in the international arenas, and with his wrist injury, many doubted him, until he gloriously won the World Championship in 2023. With such a glorious career, fans agreed that Faker deserves his place in the Hall of Fame.
For 11 years, Faker recorded 10 LCK victories and 4 World Championships. It's such an unprecedented record and no player can easily follow suit.
It is quite rare in other sports for a professional player to be inducted into a Hall of Fame before their retirement. While saying he believes it is a reflection of people's recognition of his career, Faker said it is all the more meaningful for him. Regarding his truthful personality and good deeds, he says he tries his best to behave properly.
Given that most of the audience members watching the game are quite young, they can be very much influenced. So I think I try my best to be careful, live a desirable life.
As for how a professional game player should act, he said victories and fans' recognition are what make a professional player valuable. But something else matters more.
What matters is if you yourself are satisfied with your work. Leaving my past achievements behind, I'll consider every new season a way to pave a new way, keep going on, and focus on future tournaments.
김보경, 아리랑 뉴스.
From tonight, it will start to rain on Jeju Island and the West Coast. Rain will spread to most parts of the country. This rain will cool down the summer heat. As for the amount of rain, a lot of rain, up to 80 millimeters or more, will be concentrated in the mountainous areas of Jeju Island, and up to 60 millimeters will fall on the south coast until tomorrow. In center areas, it will stop raining gradually from the afternoon. Most parts of the rain will die down during the night in other parts of the country. As it will rain across the country tomorrow, there will be a pause in the daytime heat tomorrow. In most areas, it will stay around 25 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day. There will be places on the south coast and Jeju Island where rain will continue until dawn on Sunday. After the rain stops, the summer heat will continue again. Tomorrow morning, Seoul, Daejeon, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at 18 degrees. It will move up to 25 in Seoul and Daegu, Gyeongju, 27 degrees. Summer heat will continue next week after the rain goes by. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That's all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all.